Today we come to Esther 4, the turning point in the entire book. This is the chapter where palace comfort collides with real world crisis. It's the chapter where hidden preparation becomes a visible purpose. It's the chapter that gives us one of the most famous lines in Scripture: for such a time as this. But those words were not spoken in an easy moment. They were spoken in fear. They were spoken in danger. They were spoken when people's lives were on the line. Esther chapter 4 reminds us that God often prepares people quietly, then he calls them forward suddenly. We're going to walk through it together. But first, let's back up and catch up anybody joining us today. Let's look at chapter 3. Here, Haman has manipulated King Xerxes into signing a decree to destroy the Jewish people throughout the empire. The order had gone out, lots had been cast, and a date had been set. The threat was real. And now chapter 4 opens with a response to it. Esther 4 1 through 3. When Mordecai has learned all that has been done, he tears his clothes and puts on sackcloth and ashes. He goes out through the city, crying out loudly. And across the land, the Jewish people mourn, fast, weep, and lament. This was a tough time. Mordecai understood the seriousness of the moment. This is not about an inconvenience. This is destruction. This is death for the Jews. And his response is grief, humility, and desperation before God. Sometimes when life gets hard, we want quick answers and easy fixes. But scripture shows there are moments for mourning, moments for fasting, moments for crying out and seeking God. There are seasons where faith looks like honesty before the Lord. Esther 4:4. Esther hears that Mordecai's distressed, but she doesn't know what's going on. So she sends him clothes to put on. He refuses them. Hear this. This stands out. Esther was queen, yet she was isolated. She had status. She had comfort. She had influence. But she had no idea what was happening outside of the palace walls to her very own people. That still happens today. People can be blessed and disconnected, comfortable but completely unaware, influential and uninformed. Sometimes God has to interrupt comfort in order to awake calling. Esther 4 5 to 8 tells us that Esther sends one of the king's attendants to learn what is happening. Mordecai gives him a copy of the decree and tells Esther to go before the king and plead for her people. Esther's not sure how to respond here. She knows what's going on, and once the truth reaches you, you can't remain neutral anymore. Once you know there's a need, you've got to decide if you will respond. Many people want purpose as an idea, but purpose usually begins when we stop ignoring what God has shown us. Esther 4:10 to 11. Esther sends back a word to Mordecai, and she says, anyone who goes into the king's inner court without being summoned could be put to death unless the king extends the golden scepter. And she hadn't been called to the king for a whole month, 30 days. Esther's hesitation is understandable. This was not a symbolic risk. It was real danger. She could lose her life if she approached the king. Calling sounds exciting until it costs something. Purpose sounds beautiful until comfort must meet surrender. Faith is often tested where our safety ends. Esther 4 13 to 14. Mordecai responds and says, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone will escape. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. These words carry tremendous truth. Mordecai is telling Esther three things. First, he's telling her, your position does not exempt you from your purpose. Being in the palace would not save her from reality. Sometimes we think if we gain enough comfort, success, or security, we can avoid the hard assignments, but calling still finds us. Secondly, God's mission is bigger than one person. If Esther refused, God would still deliver his people another way. That means God's purposes continue. The question is whether we want to participate in his purpose. And finally, she had been prepared for this moment. Her journey was not random. An orphan girl, raised in exile, chosen as queen, favored in the palace, all of it had been preparation. What looked like disconnect was actually divine setup. Some of you need to hear this today. The seasons you thought were wasted may have been preparation. The skills you learned in unexpected places may be future ministry tools. The closed doors may have simply been redirecting you into your calling. The years that made no sense may one day make perfect sense to you. God often prepares people long before they understand why. The preparation is a process. Esther 4:15-16. Esther sends back her answer. Go gather all the Jews and hold a fast on my behalf. I and my young women will be fasting also. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. This wasn't an emotional moment. This is where Esther changes. At first, she responded with fear. Now she responds with faith. Notice what she does first. She calls for a fast. Before action came dependence. Before courage came surrender. Before she approached the king, she approached the throne of God through humility. Then she says, if I perish, I perish. It's not about hopelessness. This is consecration. She knows the price. It means I would rather obey God with risk than preserve comfort in silence. Let's get practical. How does Esther 4 speak to us today? Maybe God has placed you where you are for a reason. Your workplace, your church, your family, your online platform, your education, your voice, your story. Maybe you've been waiting for a big future while God is asking for simple present obedience. Maybe you are in your own for such a time as this season. You do not need the whole map. You need the next yes. Remember, God is at work for those who love him and are called according to his purpose, working it out for their good. He has a purpose and he's at work in your purpose. Esther 4 teaches us God positions before he reveals. God prepares before he promotes. God calls people out of comfort into courage. And sometimes the very place you've questioned is the place he intends to use. So if you feel hidden, uncertain, or unready today, remember, you may have been brought here for such a time as this. If this encouraged you, subscribe, comment, continue this journey through Esther with me, because the same God who positioned Esther is still positioning his people today.